If I'm honest, I was just confused because I looked at your stream and you cut your beard.
Oh, yeah. I did cut my beard. I don't know. I go through a roller coaster of emotions with my beard. It's the whole thing. But
It
anyways.
threw me off because I'm used to it being like big.
Mm-hmm. And today we are going to talk about 10 tips every DM should know. If you guys like it, like and subscribe. Let's get into it. So, first tip is prepare as much as you need as a DM. You probably talk to other DMs and they will probably prepare large Excel sheets, read about every single monster, every magic item, create loot tables, build world maps, go through and create names for NPCs. And then you also have the DM, like Philip here, that kind of improvises a lot of it. So,
Hey, it works.
Hey, I know, and I've actually become more of a DM that also improvises. I used to be a DM that prepares a lot, but just don't try to force preparing or don't force the amount that you need to prepare for a campaign just because you think that that's what you need to do. If you're good at improvising, just have fun with it, just roll with it, and just be a little bit more casual. But if you want to be organized, you're someone that wants to actually know every little bit, and bring to the table everything that you can find, then just do you.
Number 2. Magic items. Be careful when you give them out, because some are overpowered as all heck. Even low-level magic items can break a game. Winged boots are just uncommon, but giving a character flight is ridiculous. But don't let that scare you into not giving out magic items. Even if it's just a cloak of billowing, which is just silly fun. A magic item like that is just really fun to get and exciting, and you can give out a lot of magic items that don't really affect combat and won't be overpowered, but are fun to get. They're always fun to get. You just gotta be careful with the overpowered ones. And we can do a list of overpowered ones in the future, but yeah, it's little treats. People are always asking for level ups, so once they have a level up, give people magic items. It really helps keep people happy and want to keep going back. They're like M&Ms.
It's like M&M's, not sponsored.
Yeah.
But could be.
But I am eating them, and they're delicious.
Could be sponsored. M&M.
I'm down.
On top of the magic item thing, +1 weapons might seem like they just add 1, and that's pretty small, but +1 stuff, +2, they do add up in the long term. So just be careful with those.
Also, +1 weapons overcome magical resistance to bludgeoning, slashing, piercing. So, I mean, if you give them out early, then suddenly you don't have that. Something better to do would be to give out a weapon that isn't necessarily +1, but maybe does another benefit. Like, maybe against a certain type of monster, you get an additional D4 damage. That kind of thing is really cool, because then it's like, oh, against skeletons, this hammer's even better.
Yeah.
You know, like that kind of thing. That's really cool, because then it also gives your players reason to not just use the weapon with the biggest dice.
Third tip, avoid telling players what to do and suggest basically kind of as a last resort, or if the players seem stuck. And give them time to think too. I think one mistake I made when I was a younger DM was if there were times of silence, as a DM you think the players are confused, but they might honestly just be thinking. And if you just give them a little bit, maybe someone will actually say something. But just kind of read the room, understand who you're playing with, because also you might be playing with people that kind of don't take the initiative to speak up. So that in that case, you might want to be a little bit more suggestive. But ultimately the players are playing characters, and they kind of need to figure out what their characters want to do in the world. Try to give them as much information as possible, but just don't tell them what to do explicitly, because it's supposed to be their adventure, just in your world.
Well, and for reference, when you started out as a DM, I was one of your players, but we were playing with some people that had never played before, and I don't want to just like run the show as a player, so I would just hang back and let them do things. So there was a lot of silences,
Mm-hmm.
and that's normal.
Yeah.
But if you, as a DM, start suggesting things, like I was a player and I probably had ideas, but like I want the other players to too. So there's also like as a DM, if you have an experienced player, instead of getting them to do that, another good thing would be like talk to the more experienced player and just tell them like, hey, if there's a moment when nobody's really doing anything, just in character ask other characters what they think you should do, get the ball rolling.
Fourth tip is to give up control as a DM. One of the best things about D&D is just the craziness of it and kind of the collection of very different viewpoints, how people play, very different characters as well. So the campaign can go a lot of different ways, and honestly in ways that you as a DM probably wouldn't expect. So my general strategy for DMing is I have broad ideas that I kind of want to nudge players toward, and I kind of will shift, maybe the world, or I might move a location if I want them to find like a specific thing. I might move its location based off what they do, but I would never force them to be like, if I put an important story item in a room, just be like, oh, are you sure you want to leave? Oh, the door's locked. Yeah, so maybe just look around some more, find it. No, just put it somewhere else, or just say they found it on the ground or something else that makes sense. Find ways and just kind of like adapt to what the players do. It's a lot more fun if you kind of give up control and realize that going off the rails is probably more fun than what you had planned. But, if you're doing a final boss fight that's like the culmination of the whole story, I would recommend being a little bit more railroady there, because you do want them to get to a specific point that is very rewarding. But for the majority of the campaign, just have fun and be a little bit more free with it.
So the next one is to know the rules as best you can. You don't need to know every rule. Get a good sense of the rules, like give the basic player's handbook a once over just on how to run combat, or maybe even just like look up a dungeon or an adventure book and read the first little chapter. It'll tell you how to get started. It's very useful. And when you don't know a rule, it is very easy to find a rule online. You can Google a rule and get an answer within 15 seconds, usually. So there's not really any reason to need to know all the rules going in. You can find them pretty quickly. And if there's an argument about a rule, as the DM, you do get final say. But if you want to play by the book, just look it up. It doesn't take long to look it up. Usually the amount of time it takes to argue about a rule, it would have been faster to look it up. It's very easy to do so. It rolls into the next point we have, which is if you change the rule, be consistent. Like a very common rule change that we play with is that you can drink a healing potion as a bonus action instead of an action. And we just always have that rule. So it's one of those things that we just always play with. It's very consistent, and that's just how you play the rule, but you have to do it consistently. You have to be consistent with it. If you have home rules, try to tell the players before the campaign starts, if you could think of them. And if one comes up, just let them know. because if I were to join a game and it has a bunch of home rules and I don't know about them, and then it comes up and it like ruins everything I'm gonna do in my turn, it'd be pretty annoying. So just keep an open dialogue. Communication is huge in this game. It's the entire point of this game.
Number 7, focus on your strengths as a DM. I will never try to make voices with NPCs as a DM. It's just not going to work. You guys can hear my voice. Other
It's
thing,
really funny when you do, though.
because it doesn't sound any different, apparently. It's so different for me, but not for you guys.
For me, my strength is improv. I ran a one-shot recently where one of the players went to talk to a rat and asked it for information. Rats aren't that smart. So it told her about like the big head rat down in the sewers. She thought it was a person that it was talking about. It wasn't. Then they went into the sewers to go talk to this person. It's just a big rat. So like we had this whole side story in a one shot because someone talked to a rat. Like I'm very good at just suddenly having this. Like I built a whole sewer system on the fly because somebody talked to a rat because they wanted to get information about the one shot that they were going on. You know, my strength is just making stuff up on the fly and making it feel like it was always planned. But that's not everybody's. Some people's strength are planning very intricate stories ahead of time that have really good resolutions, really good plot points, really good twists and turns. I'm better at kind of outlining it in my head, more or less. And then as the players go through, like everything flows more naturally just with the improv. That's my strength. My strength is not really finding cool encounters. It's more in the role play.
It's not that, like, as a DM, you're gonna have to, unfortunately, do everything. Like, even if you plan, like, crazy, the players are gonna do something that's gonna force you to do some improv, and it's great to work on your weaknesses, but really double down on your strengths. I'd say one of my weaknesses that I don't play around with is I'm not very good at emotions in D&D. As a player and a DM, like trying to convey emotions and create emotional moments, really get into them, either as a NPC or a player. So they don't come up that much in my campaigns, and I focus more on like the world building and, you know, nowadays a lot more improv as I've got more experience. That improv experience was not there to begin with, and I had to do a lot of planning to kind of help overcome that weakness.
Number 8, read your players' character sheets. And then, you know, build encounters around your players' strengths and weaknesses. Like, if I have a paladin that is really good close range, immune to diseases, you know, good saving throws, then I'll want to have an encounter, at least one every so often, that, you know, that paladin really shines in that encounter. And then if I have a druid in the party, maybe we'll have a role play area where it would be really useful to have her or him wild shape, and it'd be really good. Like, build things around their strengths, but because you want your players to shine. D&D is a power fantasy at the end of the day, so you want your players to feel powerful, feel useful, feel like they are the protagonist. But in addition to that, to make compelling stories, you need to also target their weaknesses. So if you have a player that has really low intelligence, use monsters and enemies that can target that with saving throws, target that with different things, because you want to also target their weaknesses. But don't just do one or the other, because if you only play to their strengths, then they'll feel too strong, and if you only play to their weaknesses, then they'll feel like, why did I even make a character that's good at this when it never comes up? Mm-hmm. You want to do both. It's a good give and take. A good rule of thumb is make bosses good against their weaknesses and minions weak against their strengths. I think that's a really easy way to do it. And then after that, rolling into number 9, as the DM, you're the DM, you're the storyteller, you're the narrator, but you're also kind of like the mom of the group. You have to mediate. You have the most power to do that. If there is somebody that is giving trouble in the group, talk to them privately. It is not up to the players to have conflict resolution. Like, you are the game master. If this was an online multiplayer game, you are the one that people report that players to. You are the company that made the game, essentially. If someone is having issues with another player, work it out privately. Don't make it a whole group discussion if there's somebody having issues. But, you don't have to play with someone you don't want to. And if everybody doesn't want to play with someone, then you probably shouldn't. And then if one person is having issues with everybody else, but they don't mind that person, then you should probably have a conversation with them about, like, why are you even here if you don't like anyone else? Like, if you want this to be a single player game, that's not what this is. Just mediating the group, making sure to try and keep things on track where roleplay is fun. You can get into roleplay arguments all the time, but at certain points it can escalate very easily. So just trying to keep tensions low and keep it fun.
And speaking of fun, that brings us to our 10th point. D&D is about having fun. So have fun as a DM. If you aren't having fun as a DM, I would say maybe DMing isn't for you. At least if you're not having fun long term. I would say my motivations starting out as a DM was because I just wanted to play more D&D. But I think that resulted in a decent amount of time where, like, I wasn't having that much fun, making mistakes as early DMs do. And yeah, I think I just wanted to create games for the sake of playing D&D, not for the sake of having fun for myself. And, if you're not having fun, unfortunately, it shows quite a bit, like, onto your players and onto your campaign. This goes for a player as well. If there's someone that doesn't want to be there, it's a group game, so you'll notice they're quiet, or possibly they're, like, dismissive. They don't role play very much, or maybe they take a long time on their turn because they have been on their phone, weren't paying attention. So if you're not having fun as a DM, long term, the first couple sessions you might honestly not have that much fun. It's a little bit overwhelming. But long term as a DM, if you're not having fun, maybe you're just not the type of player to DM. And that's totally fine too. There's a reason why there's only one DM and, like, 5 players. Like, there's the majority of people, I would say, haven't DM'd.
Yeah, most people haven't. Also, players can tell when you're not having fun.
Yeah.
Like, when you weren't having fun DMing, I know. I was one of your players. I could tell because you seemed very low energy, very short with things. Like, we would want to do something and you were just kind of like, okay. You know what I mean? Like, it's subconscious, but if you're not having fun, that's just how it's gonna happen.
So those are our 10 tips for DMs in D&D 5e. There are probably a couple hundred more tips we could think up. Well, that sounds like a lot. There are
do a couple hundred.
I know, I exaggerated that way too much. There are under 100.
At least 12. There's at least 12 more.
12, yeah. Let us know what your tips are for DMs in general. Like and subscribe. We appreciate you watching. Have a good day or night.
Bye.